It is 3 in the morning in your backyard. The yard is dark and quiet, and everything is exactly as you left it. The feeder is empty. The birdbath has gone still. The oak tree at the far edge of the lot stands in silhouette, its leaves moving slightly in a wind you cannot feel from where you are standing. And somewhere above all of that, above the roof, above the sodium glow of the streetlights, above the thin ceiling of cloud moving northwest, there is a small bird. 12 grams. Roughly the weight of 3 pennies stacked in your palm. It has been flying for 19 hours without stopping, and it will not stop for another 53. This is not a metaphor for endurance. This is not inspiration. This is a documented event that has been recorded, tracked, and published in peer-reviewed literature. And the bird is navigating. Precisely. Through darkness, through wind, through the featureless black surface of the Atlantic Ocean. It knows, in some mechanism that science has not yet fully mapped, exactly where it is going. And the only tool it is using is the sky above it. What you need to understand before we go further is that this is not a romantic idea. It is not a story we are telling about birds because we find birds beautiful, or because we want to believe that small things are capable of great things. The data exists. The journals exist. The radar studies, the tracking tags, the orientation cage experiments, they exist. Ornithologists at institutions including Cornell University, the University of Oldenburg, and Princeton have spent decades trying to understand precisely how this navigation system functions, and after all of that work, a core part of the mechanism, the part that actually processes stellar information in the brain and converts it into a bearing, remains genuinely, specifically, scientifically unresolved. Not almost solved. Not nearly solved. Open. We are going to walk through what is known. And then we are going to arrive, together, at the part that is not. This channel covers bird behaviors that science has confirmed and cannot fully explain. If that is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe now. And stay until the end, because the final section of this video contains one specific detail about what happens inside the bird's brain during migration that I think will genuinely change the way you look at the sky above your yard at night. Most people who watch birds assume that migration is essentially directional instinct. The bird feels a pull. South in autumn, north in spring. Something hormonal, something magnetic, something ancient and animal. And they are partly right, but they are describing the impulse without describing the instrument. What actually generates the precision of migration is a navigation system so layered and redundant that researchers are still cataloging its components. The blackpoll warbler, Setophaga striata, weighs between 10 and 13 grams at the start of its autumn migration. It breeds in the boreal forests of Canada and Alaska. In September, individuals fly southeast to the Atlantic coast of North America, and then, without stopping, launch over open ocean toward South America. The route is not diagonal. It is not hugged along a coastline. It is a direct transoceanic flight of between 2,000 and 2,700 kilometers, conducted over between 72 and 88 hours, entirely over water. There is no landmark. There is no coastline to follow. There is no star on the horizon pointing the way. There is only the sky, and whatever the bird can read from it. What makes this genuinely strange is this: the blackpoll warbler does not complete this flight by flying in a fixed direction. Studies using light-level geolocators, published in the journals Biology Letters and the Auk, showed that individual birds actively adjust their headings during the crossing, correcting for wind drift, compensating for displacement, updating their bearing multiple times within a single flight. This is not instinct set at departure and executed mechanically. This is live navigation. Something is being read. Something is being recalculated. And we have not closed the question of precisely what. The assumption that birds navigate using the sun is correct, and incomplete. Diurnal migrants do use the sun as a compass, reading its arc across the sky and compensating for its movement over the course of the day using an internal clock whose circadian accuracy has been measured in laboratory conditions to within minutes. This is well established. But the majority of songbird migration happens at night. And at night, the sun is not available. Something else takes over. The foundational experiment was conducted by Stephen Emlen at Cornell University in the 1960s and 1970s. Emlen placed indigo buntings, Passerina cyanea, a small North American songbird with a vivid blue male plumage, inside circular orientation cages lined with ink pads and blotting paper. Under a natural, rotating night sky, the birds oriented consistently in the seasonally appropriate direction. When Emlen rotated the star pattern in a planetarium, shifting the apparent north, the birds shifted their orientation accordingly. When he occluded the sky entirely, orientation became random. The birds were not using a magnetic sense in that moment. They were reading the stars. Further experiments showed that young indigo buntings learn the stellar rotation axis during their first summer of life, the point in the sky around which all other stars appear to rotate. In the northern hemisphere, that point is near Polaris. The bird does not know the name. But it knows the center. What makes this genuinely strange is this: the mechanism by which the bird identifies and memorizes the stellar rotation axis, and then uses it to derive an absolute compass bearing at any point on a dark ocean, involves a neural computation that has not been mapped. We know the input. We know the output. The processing in between, in a brain weighing less than 1 gram, remains one of the open problems in sensory neuroscience. Here is where it becomes more complicated. Birds do not rely on stars alone. The navigation system in a migratory songbird is not a single instrument. It is a suite of overlapping instruments, each capable of operating when the others fail, each cross-referencing the others when conditions allow. This is the part that tends to surprise people who think of bird navigation as a single elegant thing. It is not elegant in the way a compass is elegant. It is redundant in the way that aircraft navigation systems are redundant, built to keep functioning when any single component is lost. Research at the University of Oldenburg, led by Henrik Muritzen and his colleagues, has identified at least 3 distinct magnetic sensing mechanisms in birds: a light-dependent radical pair mechanism in the eye, which appears to function as a magnetic inclination compass and requires specific wavelengths of light to operate, a magnetite-based system in the beak, potentially used for map sense rather than compass sense, and further magnetic sensitivity in the inner ear whose precise role remains under investigation. These are 3 separate hardware systems, running in parallel, in a creature weighing the same as a small handful of dry rice. The Eurasian reed warbler, Acrocephalus herpaceus, was shown in experiments published in 2014 to be able to determine not just compass direction but its geographic position using magnetic information, using the magnetic field not as a compass but as a map, inferring latitude and longitude from field strength and inclination angle. This had previously been considered a capability unique to larger animals. What makes this genuinely strange is this: these systems are not simply additive. They interact. They suppress and amplify each other depending on conditions and time of night. The rules governing their integration, which system dominates under what circumstances, and how conflicting information from different systems is resolved, are not yet established. The bird knows what to do when its instruments disagree. We do not yet fully know how it decides. Take a moment to consider the scale of what we are describing. The forebrain of a blackpoll warbler has a volume of approximately 0.6 cubic centimeters. That is roughly the volume of a single green pea. Inside that structure, the bird maintains a calibrated map of the night sky, a learned model of stellar rotation, an integrated magnetic compass derived from at least 2 independent physical mechanisms, an internal chronometer accurate to within minutes, a real-time wind drift compensation system, and, apparently, the capacity to update all of these during a continuous 72-hour oceanic flight. In 2015, a blackpoll warbler fitted with a 0.5-gram light-level geolocator was tracked completing a non-stop transoceanic flight of 2,770 kilometers, from the coast of Nova Scotia to the island of Puerto Rico, in approximately 62 hours. The bird weighed 9.2 grams at departure. The tracking device it carried represented more than 5% of its body mass. It arrived, having navigated the featureless Atlantic at night, alone, and landed within a target landmass it had never seen before. The entire navigational computation that made this possible, the star reading, the magnetic cross-referencing, the drift correction, ran continuously inside that 0.6 cubic centimeter forebrain, in a bird that was simultaneously beating its wings approximately 16,000 times per hour for 62 consecutive hours. What makes this genuinely strange is this: we have not found the dedicated neural structure responsible for stellar navigation. In other sensory systems, magnetoreception, for instance, researchers have begun to identify specific regions. But the celestial compass appears to be distributed across multiple forebrain regions, none of which is structurally specialized in a way that sets it apart. The navigation is happening in there. The substrate, the wiring, the exact algorithm, genuinely unknown. There is one further layer to this that is worth slowing down for. The stellar navigation system in a migratory songbird is not hardwired at birth. It is learned. The young bird, hatched in early summer, still in its natal territory, not yet migrating, spends a period of weeks watching the night sky rotate. It is doing something, in those weeks, that we do not have a satisfying mechanistic account for. It is identifying the point of minimal apparent motion in the rotating stellar field, storing that point as north, and constructing from it an absolute reference frame that it will use for the rest of its life. This learning window is critical and time-sensitive. Indigo buntings raised under a stationary star field, or denied access to the night sky during the appropriate developmental period, showed severely degraded or entirely absent stellar orientation in subsequent migration tests. The window appears to close. After it closes, the bird either has its stellar map or it does not. There is no second chance to learn the sky. What this means is that the bird you watch at your feeder in July, the fledgling, still begging, still unsteady on the feeder rim, is already, during the nights of that same July, learning to read the rotation of the cosmos. Not metaphorically. Literally constructing its celestial navigation system, one dark sky at a time, before it has ever flown south. What makes this genuinely strange is this: the developmental neuroscience of this learning process, how the young bird's visual system samples stellar rotation, which brain regions encode and store the rotation axis, and how that learned reference frame becomes integrated with the magnetic and other navigational systems that come online later, remains largely uncharacterized. We know that learning happens. We do not yet know, at the level of neurons and synapses, what learning the sky looks like from the inside. Go back to 3 in the morning in your backyard. The feeder is empty. The oak at the edge of the lot stands in silhouette. The birdbath has gone still. Nothing has changed about the yard. What has changed is this: somewhere above it, above the streetlights, above the thin ceiling of cloud, there is a small bird flying south. And it knows exactly where south is, not because something told it, not because it is following a leader, but because at some point in July, in darkness, it watched the sky turn. It found the axis. It stored it. It will use it tonight, over water, over a distance you would plan carefully and fly by instrument and still find disorienting. The bird weighs 12 grams. Its brain is the size of a pea. And somewhere inside that pea, a celestial map is running, precise, self-correcting, 72 hours deep, in a structure that no laboratory has yet been able to isolate, or describe, or replicate. The yard is quiet. The sky above it is not. And the mechanism by which that small bird reads it, the actual neural algorithm, the precise conversion of starlight into bearing, is one of the open questions of biology. Not an almost answered question. An open one. The kind that sits at the edge of what we currently know and simply waits. Have you ever noticed a bird at your feeder or in your yard that seemed unusually still, or unusually oriented in a particular direction, and only later realized it might have been a migrant stopping over? I read every comment.